Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a 15 Floodgate that I actually just did. I recorded this. It's 12:48 p.m. when I'm starting this recording, and as you can see down here, it's probably hard to see, but I did this key at 12:13 p.m. is when this key started, so I just finished doing it. I wanted to go through and talk about some of the things that happened during this key and things that have changed since the last video. So first off, I guess to start out with, I'll just mention that going into this pull, into this key, this is a very common route right here. You run up these rocks, you grab this first pack, you have to jump over this lip, and then you grab these two packs on the side, that pack of surveyors and the shreddinator, and then the far pack. So this, I think, is 6 packs in a row, um, and then you get into your CDs. So first thing I'll mention, because a lot happened right there, is in the last video I was playing with Shadow Crash, the version of Shadow Crash that just targets an enemy, that you cast on an enemy and it just flies to it regardless of where it is. In this key, I've since changed to the version of Shadow Crash that you target the ground, right? So if we go back just a little bit, you can see as we're pulling into this, I'm going to dot a couple things and then I'm going to send two Shadow Crashes. And the first Shadow Crash, I'm going to send kind of up in this area where the big group of mobs is going to be. But then the second Shadow Crash is going to go kind of in this blue area where like these two packs are kind of moving towards. So I hopefully get most of those with that second crash, and I hopefully get most of like these guys with this first crash. That's a bad one, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. So I'm going to shadow crash up there, and I'm going to shadow crash down here in the middle. If you keep an eye out, you'll see I send a vampiric touch on this first contractor, then I tab target to that second contractor. I want to get this group. Let's see, not that. I want to get this group and this group. If I can get all of those guys with a shadow crash, that would be perfect. And then because there's a surveyor, there's this contractor, and then these 3 loader bots. Because I only have 2 shadow crashes and they're only 6 targets each, you're not going to be able to dot everything with shadow crash here. So you want to start sending a couple of vampiric touches, like I'm vampiric touching this contractor right now, and then I'm tab targeting to the second contractor and I'm gonna vampiric touch him. You're gonna need to vampiric touch at least like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 mobs here. So I vampiric touch the one, I get the second. I'm doing the third right now on this contractor that's off here to the side. Most stuff is grouping up here at this point. Um, and then I send my first shadow crash, like I said, over here in this kind of area to try and hit this big group. And then I notice that this group is still kind of over here, so I send my second shadow crash to hopefully catch even this contractor as well as these 4 mobs that are running in, even though this one already has a vampiric touch on it. And this guy, it's kind of hard to see, so maybe I'll do it like with red or something. This guy doesn't have dots on him. Um, and so maybe I should have, instead of sending this vampiric touch on this guy, I probably should have sent it on that guy, and then I should have let this guy that already has vampiric touch on him get caught by this shadow crash that's going out right now. So you'll see the shadow crash goes out. It does hit all of these mobs right here that I was hoping it would hit. So it got that contractor, got these 4 guys, which means that I've got pretty much everything dotted up going into this pull. And then the next thing I want to mention is something that I've changed since the last video, and that is kind of the opening rotation as you get into your cooldowns and the way you play through your cooldowns. The way I was doing it before was incorrect. There's a slight change that I needed to make, and I'll talk about it as this gets going. But it's pretty impactful, and you'll be able to see as this pull goes on that my DPS I'm pretty sure I broke like 30 million DPS or something in this pull, so which is higher than I've done in any other pull without that change. So I'll talk about it as we get into this. Everything pretty much has dots on it now, and you can't be certain because you can't see all of the nameplates. You'd have to tilt your camera down to really go and look through. but we're at a point getting into this poll now where I'm comfortable that enough things are dotted that I can send my cooldowns, and if I have to spend a global putting a vampiric touch on one or two things that I missed while I'm in my cooldowns, I'm willing to do that. Although it is pretty significant DPS loss to send vampiric touches when you don't have to. If it's if you have nothing else and you're just going to cast a Mind Flay to like fill while you're in the middle of your CDs because you have no Insanity for Devouring Plague, you don't have a MFI proc, you don't have anything like that, Void Torrent that you could send or anything. If you're just going to be filling with a Mind Flay, then that's a great time to send a Vampiric Touch to make sure that you get Psychic Link damage on a different mob. So there are times where you're gonna not dot everything, go into your cooldowns anyway, and then however many globals in, you send one or two vampiric touches as globals on other mobs. Um, so that's what I'm thinking going into this. I'm about to send my CDs. So first off, you Halo. I actually did this incorrectly. Um, you're gonna want to before you Halo, you're gonna want to Void Torrent, and it looks like I have my Void Torrent going right now. So I think I haloed and then void torrented. It happens very quickly, so it's a little hard to see, and maybe I'll play it back in full speed in a second. But you want halo, you want to get your void torrent out, and then for me it's a little awkward because I have this giant buzz saw on my head, so I need to move. But ideally, what you would do is void torrent halo, send your shadow fiend, which I've sent already, and then immediately void eruption. And what I was doing before, if you watch my rotation in previous videos, I would send my Void Eruption, I would click on an ally that I wanted to PI, I would cast PI on them, I would press Vampiric Embrace, I would press my on-use Trinket on the enemy, and then after I've done all of those things, I would send a DPS potion, and then after I do all of those things, my very first ability in Void form would be Mind Flay Insanity, and you don't want to do that. You're losing a pretty significant amount of damage if you do that. It was just that if you can kind of see down here, it's not the easiest. But my keybind right now for my for this trinket for my on-use trinket is Control Shift 1, which I have an MMO mouse, so it's not too crazy to manage a Control Shift 1 pretty quickly in the middle of all this stuff. But it puts my hands in such a spot that it feels really natural for me to go from Control Shift 1 to just 1, which is my Mind Flay Insanity button. And it feels a lot harder. It's actually on the completely opposite side of my mouse to go from Control Shift 1 back to equals, which it's kind of underneath this timeline, but equals is my Void Eruption Void Bolt button. So really, I need to change. I've been working on getting the muscle memory down, and because when I came back to the game, I just started doing the trinket into Mind Flay Insanity thing. Um, I have a lot of muscle memory for that, and I'm trying to work on it to get back to the Void Bolt as your first global. And really, you can save your PI and your trinket and your potion until after that first Void Bolt and do it while you're in that GCD. Because right now, I send Void Eruption, and right after it sends, I spend time that I'm off the GCD doing things that don't need the GCD uh, to happen, right? I'm pressing my Vampiric Embrace, which is off GCD. I'm pressing my PI. I'm pressing my Potion, and I'm pressing my Trinket. All four of those things don't need the GCD, and you should be doing them when you can't be casting other spells. That's just the most efficient way, right? When I Void Eruption, I have Void Bolt available immediately. As soon as your Void Eruption goes off, you're ready to cast your next spell. And I spend some amount of time with that old rotation, uh, spending casting abilities that don't need the GCD, like I said. So a big change that I'm trying to make, and I do it in this first poll, and I'll go back just a couple seconds so you can see it. I do it in this first poll. I Void Eruption, I send my Void Bolt, and right after I send my Void Bolt is when I press all of that off GCD stuff. It'll be a little quick and hard to see, but watch this icon right here, my Void Eruption icon, and then watch these other ones like my PI. So dot a couple things, like I said, send a couple of Shadow Crashes, send my Halo and my Void Torrent, and I get into my CDs, and then right as I'm in my CDs, oh, actually, I think I did it wrong there too. That's definitely not good. So let's go back and see really quickly. So just a bit, yep. So I go Dang, that's frustrating because I know that I did it correctly multiple times during this dungeon, but that also just goes to show, I guess, that the DPS that I could be doing in this pull, could it be even higher than it ends up being? Yeah, so I did do it incorrectly there. Um, it was probably hard for you to grab, maybe go back and play it at 0.25 speed or whatever, but you'll see that I send my Void Eruption and my Void Bolt sits there for a second while I do my. I mean, it's pretty quick, right? I can press Control 5, Control Shift 1, Control 3, really quickly to instantly send those three abilities, but that's still a non-zero amount of time that I should have had a Void Bolt sent during. But yeah, I mean, it ended up not mattering too much. We timed the key. I peaked at like 32 million DPS, something like that, which is plenty for this situation. Our healer is standing in this crazy spot right here. Our tank, I don't know if you could see him, our tank like jumped across and pulled a bunch of stuff and then brought it up the stairs. I thought this is a sweet pull that we went into. These guys, the our hunter, he's this punk rock guy, and you can't really see him, but our DH, they all went down this way instead of coming around kind of where I was, which was over through this way off the stairs. They were following the tank, and I think a lot of the time people will do that where they finish that pull and jump down that arrow into that main area. But really, it might have been nicer, at least for the hunter, if he had followed me over this way and been able to just catch all this stuff at the top of the stairs. Because if we keep an eye on him, I wonder where he ends up going. Oh yeah, he's kind of in an awkward spot. Yeah, he falls down. He has to like make his way back up before he can start hitting anything. Whereas I'm already over here, blasting. And not to flame him or anything. He's blasting as well, and he's not doing anything crazy wrong. I wonder if it's just a familiarity thing. And really, I wonder how many groups I would have been doing the wrong thing by running around the side instead of jumping down like everybody else did. There's probably a lot of groups where that would be the case. So anyway, there's some pretty big things you need to be aware of in these packs. Those bloodthirsty cackles, cast and enrage on the like hound things that are doing them. So you want to kick those if possible. As a shadow priest, we're not too worried about kicking those hideous cackles because hopefully somebody else is kicking them. I still haven't set up my UI to be able to see everybody's kicks yet, but I do plan on doing that eventually at least. Right here, I have a Shadow Crash, but I'm manually vampiric touching these things. It was probably better to. I didn't know that we were going to pull in this loader bot group, but it probably would have been better to manually vampiric touch a couple of these things down here, wait just half a second longer while he pulls in these loader bots, and then send my crash in the middle of everything there, and get my dots on, more than just the engineer dude who's up on his scaffolding, which I'm pretty sure is like pretty much the only guy who I hit with my shadow crash there, but I could be wrong. But yeah, like I was saying, there's these bloodthirsty cackles that go off that they are dangerous. But like I said, somebody else really should be kicking those, and you do have the option to kick them occasionally, but it's more important, I think, to be kicking a trick shot if there's a trick shot cast that's going to be on you, that nobody else can kick. That's when I would want to save my kick for, to make sure that I don't get one shot by the trick shots. So then we pull a bunch of bombs, we pull those two divers, and we pull these contractors onto this. I think he's called an engineer, right? He's an architect. What's the difference? I don't know. Um, and so we pull all this stuff onto these guys. I have my Halo, so I want to send it. Yeah, I send it immediately. And then this is something that I kind of hinted at when I was talking about the rotation change for the opener, but matters outside of CDs as well. Um, which I guess you could call your Halo a 1 minute CD, so maybe it's technically a small CD window or whatever. Um, what matters is that you don't ever send a Mindflay Insanity proc on a mob that doesn't have all three dots on it. And this is something that, like, I knew in the back of my head makes sense, but I was talking to a Shadow Priest who's trialing in our guild right now. He's actually a really cool guy. His name is MGXO on Sargeras, and he's trialing with us, and he was telling me that We basically, I haven't spent a ton of time reading through the talents and understanding exactly what all the little nuances are in the rotation. I've kind of just so far this season been um, spitballing things and doing things that feel okay based off of my previous experience playing Shadow Priest, right? So like I know, for example, obviously that uh, you're gonna send PI on a different target so that you get the benefit as well from the Twin Flames or whatever it's called. Stuff like that. I know that you want to cast your Devouring Plagues, to not overcap on Insanity or whatever, but basically all of this stuff has just been feely crafted by me. I haven't spent time like looking through the priest Discord or like talking to a bunch of Shadow Priests to figure out what the actual optimal stuff to do is. But that has changed now. I have been talking to this MGXO guy who is honestly uh, a super solid Shadow Priest, and he's been telling me that he's also, a min maxing Shaman or a Havoc Demon Hunter or all these other classes. He can multi-class and play at a really high level. So basically, we had this big long discussion where we talked through the little things of what actually matters in the Shadow Priest rotation. And one big thing that he pointed out to me is that Devouring Plague has been changed since the last time I played, which makes total sense. I mean, there's a lot of things different since the last time I played. Like Void Volley didn't exist the last time I played, and Halo didn't really matter to press the last time I played, and there's a bunch of little things like that. Mind Flay Insanity, for example, wasn't a thing when I played, so uh, we talked, and he was like, "Yeah, so your Devouring Plague, there's a talent now that means your Devouring Plague gets 30% additional damage or additional contribution from your mastery, something like that." So in the past, imagine you had 20% mastery. In the past, in old Shadow Priest, when I used to play at a high level, um, your three dots would each contribute your mastery percentage of damage towards the target, right? So if you had 20% mastery, like I was saying, and you had three dots on a target, then you got 3 times 20 percent extra damage against that target. So you would be doing 60% more damage against a target that had Vampiric Touch, Shadow Word Pain, and Devouring Plague on it. That was the old Shadow Priest. Now that's no longer the case. You do still get your regular. Also, right here, that was a really hard thing to dodge. I could have dodged it, but I suck, and he ended up almost killing me, almost one-shotting me. I'm lucky that I had 100% HP, or I would have died. I could have dispersed it as well, but I didn't disperse until after it hit me, which was not good. Um, but anyway, yeah. So nowadays, your Vampiric Touch contributes your mastery percentage. Your um, what's it called? Your Shadow Word Pain contributes your mastery percentage towards that number of bonus damage that you do. But your Devouring Plague uh, gets extra. And really, the number doesn't matter too much for how much extra. All you need to really know is that it's extra, and it's a significant amount. I'm pretty sure it's something like 30% extra, but I'm not positive. It might be like 50%, or it might be something like that. I'm pretty sure the tooltip reads 150%, meaning if you have 20% mastery, your Devouring Plague gives you 150% of that, which would be 30%, right? So I mean, there's a little bit of nuance there, and like as you can probably tell, I'm not 100% positive on the little details. I was earlier when I was talking to that MGXO guy, and it's in our DM somewhere, so I'm sure I can go back and read it and make sure. But the key takeaway from that is just that you never want to send an MFI, which is Mind Flay Insanity. You never want to send one of those into an enemy that doesn't have all three dots. And really, that kind of is true for any of your abilities. You would prefer, because it's such a big mastery percentage from Devouring Plague, you would prefer to not use any abilities on an enemy that doesn't have all three on them, but you're going to run into situations where you have to, and it just so happens that your Mind Flay Insanity is your hardest hitting button. So that's the one that you can save, and you have time to save it. If you could send every Mind Blast, for example, only into enemies that have all three dots on them, you would do that. If you could send your Halo and your Shadow Word Death and anything like that, your Void Volley, for example, uh, into targets that only had all three dots, that would clearly be optimal. But there are times where you're not going to be able to, right? You're going to want to. You can have almost 100% uptime of your Devouring Plague on one target. It's like something like 96% or 98%. But there are going to be in a situation like Mythic Plus where you're not just patchwork fighting a training dummy one target. There are going to be mobs that don't have all three of your dots on them, and therefore you're gonna have to cast spells into things like that. Like for example, if this mob I'm targeting right now has Devouring Plague on it and dies, and I don't have enough insanity to cast a Devouring Plague on the next target, then I'm gonna have to spend some amount of time on that next target hitting it without all three dots on it, right? That's essentially what I'm getting at. You do get an extra benefit from having all three dots on one target in Mythic Plus because it translates to more Psychic Link damage. So you do for sure want to be hitting in a big pack like that. If you're like, for example, this pull, we have this huge pull of two groups of three plus the boss and her five little cronies or whatever. So I'm pretty sure there are at least 12 mobs here if you include the boss. In a pull like this, you always want to be hitting a target that has all three dots on it, even after you've dotted all the other mobs, because that extra benefit that you get from the Devouring Plague towards your mastery damage, which is huge and is going to be a big difference, that extra damage that you get gets reflected through your psychic link to the other enemies, right? So it's very important that even in a big pack like that, if there are like a bunch of little mobs, you want to make sure that the mob that you're doing the most damage to, the mob that you're focusing, is the one that has Devouring Plague on it. And there are also times where you can get Devouring Plague on two, maybe three targets. You're not going to be able to make it last for very long on three targets unless you're like in Void form, have PI and Lust, and even then it's not going to be a super long amount of time that you can keep Devouring Plague on three targets. Right here I missed my Shadow Crash on that final guy, so I tried to dot him right there, but I missed, so I'm going to have to click on him again and dot him again. There we go, he's got it. You want to make sure all of these things have that. Super important. Um, but yeah, at this point, I'm just watching for any maximum distortions that the little dudes cast. These mechano drones or mecha drones or whatever they're called. They'll cast maximum distortion, and this ability, if it goes off, you wipe. We're in a group that has a decent amount of kicks. We've got a hunter kick, we've got a DH kick, we've got our tank kick, so I'm not too worried about it. Um, but there is at least one time during this. Oh, it looks like maybe we missed that one. But there is at least one time during this where I see a maximum distortion going off. Maybe it's this one right here. Yeah, that maximum distortion was going off, and I wasn't sure if anyone was going to get it. So I get it, right? Um, it gets pretty sketchy here. We pull in another group from down below. I know that if you stand really close to this edge, let me pause so I can highlight this. I know if you stand too close to this edge right here, that you can accidentally, as a ranged player, get pushed back or accidentally pull mobs that are down here. And I'm not sure. I don't think that's what happened in this case. I think those were pulled on purpose. But if that is what happened, and any of these guys see this video, my apologies. I didn't mean to do that. But we ended up making it work, so it wasn't a huge deal. And actually, something else I'll mention is this healer, this Holy Paladin, freaking owned, dude. This guy did crazy, crazy healing. Kept me alive in situations where I was pretty nervous I was going to die. And it got to a point where I was like so trusting of this guy, this Holy Paladin, that I thought, you know what? I could disperse here. You'll see on the last boss, there are a couple of moments where he has like very little mana and I'm super close to dying, like maybe two ticks away or something, like really, really close to dying. and I still don't send my dispersion. That was a conscious choice, and it did pay off because throughout this key, this Holy Paladin just really kicked butt. You know, he was really owning, and I trusted him to keep me up there at the end, and it ended up being the right move. I did more damage overall, which meant that the key ended sooner, right? And I was in less of a dangerous situation, in a dangerous situation for less amount of time, um, because I could trust him to keep me alive during that situation. It was sweet. And shout out. I don't know how you say that. Shout out to this Sturma guy. Great job, dude. You did really good. In fact, everybody in this key, I thought, did a really good job. This was my first 15 that I've timed this season, and spoiler alert, but at the end of the video, you'll see that it was also the key that pushed me over 3 KIO, which is sweet. Um, there are a couple of, I think Arakara and Priory of the Sacred Flame are my last two keys I need to do above a 12, for me to get started on Resilient keys. Um, but I've only done I think like a 10 Arakara and an 11 Priory. But I also have a 14 Eco Dome, a 15 Floodgate, and so my what's it called? My like lineup there of my best runs looks a little funky. Okay, so going into this poll, I don't have my CDs, and you'll notice pretty quickly that the other two guys, at least it seems to me, I guess I don't actually know because I don't have my, I kicked that trick shot because it was pretty far. I don't have my Omni CC set up yet to keep track of their CDs, which is another pretty suboptimal thing that I'm doing. Let me pause real quick so I can talk about this. This Warp Blood ability that this Dark Fuse Blood Warper casts hurts way bad. So if you can, fade it and use your Desperate Prayer when you need to. Don't be afraid to use your health potions. Don't be afraid to use your health stones. And if you were in a really bad situation, like I wasn't in a great spot there, but if you're in a really bad situation, um, that is a super appropriate time to cast Dispersion. So that was another example right there of me going into my CDs, immediately casting a Mind Flay Insanity instead of doing a Devouring Plague. I'd have to go back and look. Actually, let's do that. So I'm about to get into my CDs here. I just want to make sure there are times where if you're like in a pack like this beforehand and you haven't sent your CDs and then you bring in other mobs, there are times where you would cast Void Eruption and then not immediately cast a Void Bolt, but instead full channel a Mind Flay Insanity, but that would be because you already have Devouring Plague on the target. So if it turns out that I did, then I did it correctly. If it turns out that I didn't, then I did it incorrectly. The reason that you want to try and pin it in your head that your first ability in Void Eruption should always be Void Bolt is because that's always true in Raid, right? In Raid, on pull, you're never going to have Dispersion, or not Dispersion, on pull, you're never going to have Devouring Plague on the boss by the time you get into Void form, and so it's never the correct move to send a Mind Flay Insanity immediately in Void form. There is an argument later on during the fight, like on your second CD window or your third CD window or whatever, that you could maybe have a Devouring Plague up in those moments. But on pull, at the very least, which is a super important thing to optimize, is your pull rotation. On pull, you're never going to have it, so you should get in the habit of not sending a Mind Flay Insanity first, but sending a Void Bolt first. And the reason you send a Void Bolt is because you're trying to generate as much insanity as possible so that you can send Devouring Plague ASAP. When you send your Void Bolt in your very first Void form, your Void Bolt is going to give you enough insanity that you can instantly cast a Devouring Plague, and then right after the Devouring Plague, you can go into your Mind Flay Insanity procs, which you should have because you cast Halo before going into Void form. If you didn't cast Halo before going into Void form, then there's a chance, and in fact I think it's impossible to have a Mind Flay Insanity proc, but there's a chance that you don't, which means that your next ability after your Void Bolt, your Devouring Plague, is kind of up in the air for what's the best thing to do. Maybe your Void Volley, maybe a Halo. I mean, if you haven't sent Halo, which you probably haven't, then Halo is the way to go because it's going to start bouncing and giving you those Mind Flay Insanity procs. One other thing I'll mention here while I have this paused is that during your Halo windows, you need to get 4 Devouring Plagues out in the time that it takes for your Halo to start until it completely ends. You want to get 4 Devouring Plagues in that Halo window. Okay, so I just wanted to see here real quick, before I get into my CDs, I want to watch and make sure that the target that I'm on does actually have, so this guy does not have any dots on him. And I go in and I send, let's see who I send it on. Yeah, so this was incorrect. So this guy that I'm fighting, this Venture Co contractor, it's a little hard to see. You can see up here and on my UI right here, this is actually a super bad Mind Flay Insanity. This Mind Flay Insanity, they call him a naked Mind Flay Insanity if you do it when there's no Devouring Plague on the target. This Mind Flay Insanity has no dots on the target, so I don't know what you would call this, mega naked or like flayed or something, has no skin, you know, because there is literally, this Mind Flay Insanity is as bad as you can have right now. I have no dots on this target. I have other things I could be pressing. Like, before this Insanity, I had enough Insanity to cast Devouring Plague. So at the very least, I could have done that and then Mind Flay Insanity. But really, I should have had Vampiric Touch, a Shadow Word Pain, then Devouring Plague, then Mind Flay Insanity. Basically, this was a really, really, really bad use of Mind Flay Insanity. And I could make an argument, and I would make an argument that I was just trying to get into my CDs as soon as possible. But the more important argument, and you can see it took me until just then to put my dots on this target. That explains why I'm doing 3 million DPS less than the next guy. Um, the argument I was going to make is that I wanted to get into my CDs as soon as possible because I know that we're going to be heading towards Swamp Face here pretty soon, and I want to make sure that my CDs, I'm not sitting on them for so long that I am losing a use, right? Those mobs came in with full HP, and because we pulled in those 3 mobs, I figured, yep, this is an okay time to send my CDs. So I did that. However, it was a pretty inefficient use of my CDs there. Mostly because of that Mind Flay Insanity thing. Mostly because I didn't set up properly. Something I'll also mention, you might have noticed, I sent a Void Bolt while I was Goblin Glidering down. That's something to be aware of. I do have something to say about this pull. That's something to be aware of, is that you can cast abilities, instant casts, while you're doing your Goblin Glider, so you don't have to wait till you land before you can start hitting things. You could even Shadow Crash while you're flying down on your Goblin Glider. So you could Shadow Crash, you could Void Bolt, and then land, and then get into your stuff, or whatever. These Disturbed Kelps, all 5 of them, or however many are here, I think there's 5, all of them will be casting Restorative Algae like crazy. It's this, and it gives them a buff that heals them, and it's very important that you kick those as much as possible. But as Shadow Priests, we have um, an extra tool for this. I'll try to make this clear right now. It looks like there's actually 6, but this guy right here, and maybe I should do these with actual arrows. That guy, and that guy all have the restorative algae buff on them. So there are 3 out currently, at least. That's what I can see from this right now. There could be one back here that's really hard to see. Not this one that says 12, but one behind him. It looks like it's next to my Halo debuff on this guy. So there could be 4 that are out right now. And these are blue on my UI because we can dispel them as a Shadow Priest. So you'll see here in a second that the tank calls for a Blood Elf racial. Yeah, he says Blodo Elf, which means Blood Elf, and he's asking to purge those abilities. Oh yeah, there are 4 out here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not a Blood Elf. I play Goblin because I want Goblin Jump, and apparently that might not be the most optimal racial anymore because Void Elf might be worth looking at, but I don't have access to the Blood Elf racial. Maybe one of these other guys does. They could purge these, but I do have Mass Dispel. Mass Dispel can purge all 4 of these. It can purge up to 5. And in the worst case scenario, we have what I have bound to my Control Equals button. which is Dispel Magic, I think it's called, where you can just single target dispel those off of these. Obviously, uh, there are other ways to avoid this, right? You would prefer to kick these restorative algaes rather than dispel them, like I just dispelled that one manually. You'd rather kick them, you'd rather CC them. That's why you could see during this pull, we just like CC'd the crap out of these guys. Ice Psychic screamed, we had Blinding Light, we had the, um, what's it called? The ability that druids use that push them back. We did that. We had the Chaos Brand or Chaos Nova, I think it's called, that the Demon Hunter did. We had just like back to back to back to back CCs trying to stop those restorative algaes. If you were to do this pull in a pack in a group of like a mage, a shadow priest, and a demon hunter or something, or not a demon hunter, a warlock or something, or a boomkin, like a group that didn't have a ton of kicks, that would be a very dangerous pull. There's another example of me sending a naked Mindflay Insanity. I'll pause right here. I just want to point these out, not so much for you guys, but more so for me. I know that I need to not do them this way, but I want to make sure that I'm really hammering it home in my brain that anytime I'm starting to go to my CDs, I need to make sure, because it is so important, that I have my Devouring Plague out first and then cast Mindflay Insanity. If you watch, here comes my Void Torrent. So this guy has a Devouring Plague on him. So let's watch. Void Torrent, Halo, and then I start hovering this Hunter because I'm going to give him PI. This is one global too early. I shouldn't be giving this guy PI until after I've sent Void Bolt. So if we watch, I give him PI, I tab back. This target that I'm on does still have Devouring Plague for 1 second, and then it drops right as I start. Oh, actually, I think I hit tab. I think I tab targeted to the other guy. So that would have been okay, but this guy doesn't have Devouring Plague on him. I should have sent Void Bolt, then Devouring Plague, then Mindflay Insanity. So I'm just trying to pin down every time I catch it while I'm looking through this video real quick that in my brain it's very, very important. I need to make the connection of Void Eruption, Void Bolt, Devouring Plague, Mindflay Insanity. There is an argument that if you have enough Insanity going into your Void Eruption, that you don't need to send that first Void Bolt, that you could just do Devouring Plague, then Mindflay Insanity. But that Void Bolt is going to be pretty important anyway, so may as well send it. And often you're not going to have that. Okay, so I Shadow Crash this guy, Void Bolt. I've already got my dots on him. I Void Torrent, send out my Void Volley, send out my Shadow Fiend. I'm still... Oh, maybe I'm not actually. I was going to say I was still in Vampiric Embrace because I had used it just at the end of that last pack, but I wasn't. The tank made a call. There are just so many good things about this group. This tank kept typing to tell us what he wanted us to do, which was perfect because none of us were in Discord. And there are a lot of things in keys like this that especially higher end players, and I'm not saying this is a wrong thing to do, but a lot of really high end players will just assume that everybody knows how to handle every mechanic. I mean, this is a 15. You would expect that at this point, if you're in this key, you should know the mechanics that are going on. And so it's an okay assumption to make, especially in a group that's been doing a bunch of keys like this. But in a pug situation, this guy doesn't know what keys I've done. This guy doesn't know. I mean, he can see on Raider.io or whatever, what I have timed, but he doesn't know if I know, right? And he's taking the initiative to just guarantee that at the very least he's controlling what he can control. He tells all of us move left every time. When that mudslide cast comes out, everybody just moves left. We're all bound together by these vine things. And if he doesn't say that, then he just assumes we all know we need to move left, which is kind of a safe assumption. It's what every group does, essentially. Not every single group, but it's kind of the meta, right? And so it's not a bad assumption to make. He's spamming use Lust here, and the hunter doesn't see it for a while. We do end up using Lust pretty soon, but I'm in my CDs right now. It would have been great had we used Lust like 10 seconds before this. He's still spamming it. You'll see, this is what I'm talking about. This is good from the tank, for sure. We're in a pug. He doesn't know that the hunter is watching for the Lust or not. He doesn't know exactly, you know, all of the little details of what people are aware of. But what he does know is that he wants lust now, and the hunter isn't pressing it. So all he can do, he can't press lust for the hunter. So all he can do is spam use lust, please, right? And it worked out great. We end up using lust here just like he had wanted. It took a while, but the hunter did eventually get the memo and send it. And the same is true about what I was saying before about the move left thing. The tank cannot force you to move left. You could run right if you want. He assumes, I mean, it's a safe assumption that everybody's going to move left anyway, but he can control what he says. He can't control making you move, so he chooses to say, just in case anybody doesn't know, or just in case there's some confusion, right? He chooses to say, going into this boss, we're always going to move left. It takes like 3 seconds for him to type that out, and he'll never know whether or not it actually uh, made people move left, right? He'll never know if it was worth saying that, but in my opinion, it's always worth saying that because, like I said, it takes 3 seconds to type out, and there's a chance that someone in the key isn't aware, right? If there were someone, and maybe all of this sounds like I wasn't aware. I was aware that we were going to move left before he said that. That's, like I'm saying, kind of the meta that I'm used to. I'm just saying that it could have been the case that somebody wasn't, and him taking the 3 seconds to type that out made the difference. Something I'll mention here, this is another example of something that I've been working on, so I want to touch on it. I'm at 93 insanity. I'm about to overcap. You can, at least in a single target raid fight, you can play Shadow Priest in such a way where you never overcap any insanity. I know that you can because I looked at a log with that MGXO guy of our Mythic Fractalist kill where he wasted 0 insanity according to the log, right? So I know that it's possible. And it's super important that you spend insanity, that you never overcap, because when you're overcapping on insanity, it's just, I mean, this is like the most obvious thing to say ever, but when you overcap, that's insanity that is wasted. You can't spend it. So like right there, I cast a full Mind Flay insanity, and I think I had one other ability I spent beforehand while I was sitting at 100 insanity. I definitely overcapped there for at least a global or two. And it matters even more in a situation like this with multiple enemies that we're fighting, because there is some amount of insanity that comes from these apparitions that I can't really control. And I'm kind of having a constant inflow of insanity. So if I get up to 100 and I don't spend right away, I'm about to get 5, 6, 12, depending on crits, right? However much insanity from my apparitions that are about to land. And that matters a whole lot. Right here is a very tragic thing. I don't know if you guys just saw that. Let me go back 2 seconds and I'll show you. This is one big downside to having your Shadow Crash be bound to where your cursor is. I have an @cursor macro for it. I sent it on this door up here because I was trying to hit these guys up on top of the stairs. If you watch, there it's landing right up on that door. Very, very frustrating, and actually a really big deal because now my Shadow Crash just came off cooldown. But if I don't hit that Shadow Crash, like I just didn't, I hit it on the door. If it hits the mobs, it saves me 4, maybe 5 globals of vampiric touches. And if I don't land it on the mobs, I have to spend 4 or 5 globals spending vampiric touches trying to get psychic link damage on everything, which matters a ton. So it's very important that you're accurate with those. Our healer does go down here. I forgot that he died at this point. I'm going to send dispersion right here because it's very sketchy. I probably would have died there. Our healer like instantly gets up and tops me, which is sweet. But yeah, I had to send. I felt like I had to send dispersion there because even though I didn't know if I was about to die or not, I did know that we were in an extremely sticky situation with the healer being dead, with me being at like 30% HP, and with a bunch of abilities about to go off. So that's like, if you're ever gonna cast dispersion, that's the time, right? And I should also mention you should cast dispersion. I think I mentioned this in the previous video, but uh, being alive is so much more important than getting another Mind Flay Insanity off, or getting a Void Bolt out, or using your last global, making sure you get that last global so that you are really min-maxing every single global, right? Because if you die, then you get no more globals. um, and that's a little bit contrary to what I say at the end, what I do at the end of this key here. As we get into this last boss, I'll mention something right here, by the way. We're fighting these two big guys, and they cast this thing. Let's see, it's like a jump start or something. It's what causes all of these blue circles to pop up. It does a huge chunk of damage across the whole party every time it happens. It's maybe the Spark Slam, I'm not sure what it's called, but they do that ability, and they kind of do it just like back to back to back, like not instantly, but at a pretty frequent and uniform rate. Um, and so there's an argument here that you should focus one of them down and then hit the other one. As a Shadow Priest, you do that already by just dotting both and then single targeting one. But if you were on another class, I mean, everybody's going to cleave them, but it's more important that you kill one than you kill both at the same time, because when you have two of them casting this big ability, it's way more dangerous than if you can get it down to just one. So the faster you can get it down to just one of those guys casting that ability, the better. And I'm not a healer, so I'm not exactly positive that that's what they want. We ended up doing it with just, cleaving them down pretty evenly. This guy's about to die, and I'm pretty sure the other guy has like 20% HP. Yeah, he's at like 18% when that first guy died. So, we weren't 100% funneling into that one guy, but it ended up not mattering. It would have mattered if our healer having no mana actually matters on this boss, but as you'll see when we go into this boss, it ended up not really mattering. There were a couple of times where it was a little sketchy, but we're like on the good side of that edge. Um, I should be sending my Halo here in a second because I have like, uh, I don't want to get it too desynced. Yeah, so there we go. It's going to be about 10 seconds off. This boss is pretty straightforward, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to really uh, express your skill on Shadow Priest. Um, there are a lot of. This is actually. Oh, I was going to say this was way crazier than it was. That was still pretty crazy, but I thought I was in this tiny little hole, but I was in these. And that was still a pretty tight hole, but. Um, a big optimization that you make as any ranged player, but especially as a Shadow Priest, is optimizing your movement to be able to still get as much DPS as possible while moving. One way that you do that is by thinking 3, 4, or 5 seconds ahead for, okay, I know that the boss is going to cast this Giga Zap, for example, here in the next 3 or 4 seconds, and I'm going to pre-position during times that I have. Let's see if I do it here. I did Devouring Plague, and then I did Mind Flay Insanity. Nice. Okay, perfect. Um, so if you know that, like this turbocharge, if you know the boss is going to cast this turbocharge in the next 5 or 10 seconds, and you're not in a position yet where the ability is right on top of you and you have to move right now, then you have the power to decide, okay, when am I going to move? It's usually better to move before things happen so that when they are happening, you're already safe because then you don't have to move. Um, and when you're thinking ahead like that, okay, I can cast this ability now, move, cast this ability, move, and then by the time the ability actually gets here that I'm prepping for, I'm in the right spot, right? And you can weave in these instant casts like your Mind Blast procs, your Devouring Plagues, and your Void Bolts, right? So I think there's a lot of room on this boss specifically to express that skill to be thinking of, okay, this next turbocharge is coming out. I'm going to make sure that I save this Mind Blast proc for it so that I can move like I just did there. I'm going to save that Void Volley to make sure I can move. Something else I'll mention here that I didn't do a great job of is you want to make sure that if you're ever casting a Mind Flay Insanity, you don't ever clip it. Mind Flay Insanity will tick 4 times over its duration, always, and the each tick is like 2.5 million damage or something like that. It's a lot of damage. Maybe I'm wrong, and all four combined to 2.5 million damage. But basically, what I'm saying is each tick matters. You only get four of them. So if you're sending a Mind Flay Insanity and you cancel the last tick, you only get 75% of the damage that you could have gotten from that spell, and it's even worse for two or for one, right? So if you can avoid clipping it, that's a huge, huge, huge priority, obviously, right? There are other spells where it's not as big of a priority. Void Torrent, for example, I do think there is a time, I've had this conversation with a couple of people, but I do think that there is a time where you need to full channel your Void Torrent. That time is really, really rare. Um, and so most of the time when you cast your Void Torrent, let me pause right as this key finishes up. I get the achievement of Keystone Legend. Let's go. Oh, I got this mount. I forgot I got that. 3,000 rating. Super nice. Um, but basically, with your Void Torrent, typically you spend it so that you get stacks towards your guy who comes out and shoots your summoned mob that shoots the target, and also so that you get access to Void Volley. Um, but like I was saying before, there is a time where you're like 90 seconds into a Void form, which is another huge thing that you need to optimize as a Shadow Priest, is the length of your Void forms. If you're like 90 seconds into a Void form, you can get in a situation where you've got like 3 seconds left on your Void form before it drops. You have nothing else to cast, and you need like 15 Insanity if you want to get to another Devouring Plague. And if you can just get to that next Devouring Plague, then you can extend your Void form until about 100 seconds. And in that situation, it's in my opinion, I have yet to do the simulation craft stuff for it and figure it out. But in my opinion, in that situation, you need a full channel your Void Torrent because it generates 24 Insanity over its duration, and that's your best Insanity generation in that specific moment. You don't have any Mind Blasts. All you could do is Mind Flay or Void Torrent. Hold your Void Torrent there, send it, and channel it. Okay, that's going to be the end of this video. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you learned something, and if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you liked the video, make sure you click the like button. If you really liked it, feel free to subscribe and maybe share it with your friends. I am going to post an uncommentated version of this video. It might have come out before this one, but I am going to post one that's just the gameplay if you guys want to watch that and not hear me talk over it the whole time. I ended up doing 8.28 million overall in this key. I was about a million below the top, and I think that I could have made up that difference by the things that I mentioned in this video, specifically the Devouring Plague thing in Void form before your Mind Flay Insanity, or the Shadow Crashes that missed, or bad CD usage, stuff like that. So Shadow Priest, I think, is super strong, and I think it's only going to get better from here, baby. I think we're just going to keep moving up in the world. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!